Spirituality to economics is not a very long jump. But before we do jump, we have another very eminent woman in our midst, Dr. Nivedita Bide, who heads the Vivekananda Kendra in Kanyakumari. She will come now to the podium to introduce Sri S. Gurumurthy.
Namaskars. Swami Vivekananda had said, for India to emerge as Jagat Guru, we need men and women who are committed, competent, confident, have love, intense love for the country and selflessness. Shri S. Gurumurthy ji is one such person. Swaminathan Gurumurthy is one of India's well-known professional chartered accountants and a highly respected and sought-after corporate advisor. Because of his outstanding knowledge in finance, economics, accounts, and also law, he became the friend, philosopher, and guide at the age of 27 to Sri Ramnath Goenka, who was at that time 72. His association with Indian Express and the situation at that time in the country brought out the best at world level, the investigative journalist as well as the writer in him. Hamish MacDonald has told that he is the most powerful example of investigative journalism anywhere in the world. His influence over the corporate India, his concern, his selflessness, his competence has made him a person who can resolve the issues in business families, in corporate sectors, like for example, between Grasim and L&T, he had resolved very important issues. So he is considered as one of the most powerful persons. Many magazines like Gentleman magazine, India Today magazine, Business Baron magazine, at various times have said that he is one of the most powerful person in the country. But his power does not come from any position given by the government, but his power comes out of his inherent qualities and the intense love for our society and people. He has been guiding for many organizations. He is All India co-convener, all organizations I am not going to name, but he is All India co-convener, one of the co-conveners of Swadeshi Jagran Manch. And in Swadeshi Jagran Manch, through Swadeshi Academic Council, he took the actual empirical study of 40 community-driven industrial clusters in our country. And that is how he became the first proponent of this theory that in India, the economics is based on our community and family dynamics. One more point about him I will tell. There are many more points which I just cannot tell you in given time. That even the academic institutions also seek his guidance. So he is a guest faculty in IIT Mumbai. He is also a distinguished professor of Tumkur University to guide their research faculty on economic issues. And he is also a distinguished professor in Shastra University on a very new topic, new subject, that is legal anthropology. But more than all this, to say that it is his selflessness, love for country and dharma, the humility to learn from the society, the individuals, and the wisdom to learn from any good or bad experience, and above all, the warm heart has made him what he is. On behalf of reception committee and as well as organizing committee, we welcome as well as we express our gratitude to him for all the time that he has given for us. Thank you.
Could I please request Srimati Birla to present a memento to Sri Gurumurthy as a token of our appreciation. Ladies and gentlemen, may I request you to please put your hands together for the only man on the dais here today, Sri S. Gurumurthy. Over to Sri Gurumurthy.
Srimati Rajashri Birla, for whom I have not only great affection, but I regard her as one of the most respectable women of this country, whom I personally regard and respect. And Pujya Prema Pandurangji, Dr. V. Shanta, these are all great people. I have shared audiences with many. But this is a very special experience for me, that I share audiences with people who have such pure heart, pure service, elevated people. And Nivedita, Akhilaji, and Vanitaji, and my sister Padma Subramanyam, and Hemaji, Raji, another sister. You know, it's a very unique experience for me. I have shared audience platform before many, many audiences. But this gives me a very, very different feeling. You know, I learnt about womanhood through my mother, who was such a great soul. We lived with her. She passed away in 2012. When she was 97. Even now I recall and feel we have lived with a saint. I always felt only a woman could rise to that stature. But it is not all women who can rise to that stature. It is only women who are trained in the factory of dharma, in the laboratory of dharma. Only they can rise to that level. Now, you have listen to Premaji, who flowed like Ganga on the spiritual dimensions of Indian womanhood. But I am not a spiritually elevated person. I am not one who is well versed in literature or the traditional and religious literature. But I have some understanding about the society. I have some understanding about traditions. I have understanding about values. And that is what made me to convert the entire society into an open-air university, trying to draw lessons from it. When at the time of globalization, there was tremendous confusion in the country as to where this country will move. I had seen captains of industry, for whom I have been a friend and sometimes advisor, not being able to fathom the direction in which this country would move. I thought of taking a travel across the country. That was the learning process. For 20 years, what I have shared, learned, I want to share with you. And it is too small a time to share such a vast experience. It is not found in literature, it is not found in libraries, it is not found in universities, it is not learnt by IIT. That is the kind of experience I got, of which a glimpse I would like to share. You know, in the year 2010, when I addressed the IIT Bombay, I found the amount of ignorance about India, our economy, our history, was so unbelievable that when I told them about what real India is, not from what I feel, but what I learnt, what I have studied by researches done by the Westerners on India, not 100 years ago, but 20 years ago, which is not known to our IIT, our great scholars, our professors, research students. The IIT was stunned. All that I am going to tell you in 2 minutes. It's an amazing kind of ignorance through which this country is passing. You know, when a speaker ahead of me said, India never knew about prosperity or standard of living before globalization came into India and lifted our standards and made us feel that we can also be like the rest of the world. Until then, we had only what is known as the Hindu rate of growth. The entire IIT staff, the IIT professors, the IIT research scholars, students stood up and clapped him. I was to speak next. And I knew that this was the view in 1978. In 1983, one Paul Bairoch, a Belgian economist, studied the economy of the world for 150 years, 1750 to 1900, and he published his work which stunned the West. He said in 1750, if you have to look at the economic growth of different countries, India and China were leading the world. China with 34% of world GDP, India 24.5%, and England and America put together 2% in 1750. And in 1900, the whole situation turns upside down. India and China crashed to 8%. India 1.8% and China 6.2%. And America and England grew to 41%. This is what brought about the change of who enjoyed greater prosperity 250 years ago and how the whole fortune turned upside down. And the OECD countries, which constitute 26 networked countries of the world who share economic information and also do researches, they decided to test the validity of this finding and constituted under Angus Maddison, the greatest economic historian ever. And he was given all facilities, statisticians, historians, sociologists, economists, to test whether what Paul Bairoch said was correct or not. Angus Maddison came out with this report in the year 2001. And not 250 years or 150 years of study, 2000 years of the study of the economic history of the world. And he found that in the first year of the Common Era, India was the leading economic engine of the world with 36% of world's GDP. In the year 1000, India still leads. 1400, India still leads. 1500, India and China are equal. 1600, China leads India. 1700, India leads China. The game was between these two countries. And Angus Maddison, when he wanted to test the work of Paul Bairoch, he said what Paul Bairoch said cannot be true. I am going to test it. But he ultimately tested and came to the conclusion that if the West took the lead over the rest, it is not because of high scientific precocity or financial genius or organizational capability. It is actually because of colonial exploitation. That conclusion he gave in an economic thesis, World Economic History, a Millennial Perspective, which was published in 2001. And he kept on writing it updating it till 2010 June. And I was lecturing to the IIT in December 2010. None in the IIT knew about it. No scholar, no researcher, no professor, no student. And I gave multiple examples as to how in Roman Parliament there was a discussion in the 1st century and said how the Roman Parliament was concerned about how Indians were looting of their gold by export-led model of growth, which was confirmed by the American Institute of Sociology in research done in 1993. Nothing is known in India. The IIT students, after hearing the lectures, they all came to me and said this building should be demolished and thrown into the sea. Why are we having an institution which doesn't tell us what India is, what we were? And it is only because Indians were not proven to have performed in economic terms that we feel inferior, we feel small, we feel inadequate. And all the students and the professors came together and told me, sir, don't stop with this one lecture. We want you to continue to be our guide. And they appointed me as a visiting professor, and I am teaching them every 3 months in a year. Can you understand the extent of ignorance to which India has been landed by an education system which has nothing to do with India? You know, I am going to tell you things based on my study which you can't find in any textbook. There is no university. There is no economist. You know my theory and finding. I am not talking before you today. In 2005, when I was in America, in San Jose, I gave a lecture to an audience consisting of American and Indian people, where I theorized this topic, Indian economy is feminine in character. That's what I am going to tell you now. The Western economy actually actually the West is basically masculine. You know, there is a work done by a German professor. In 2013, this book has been written. He says, in the West, the destructive power of short-sighted masculinism, where narrow-mindedly focuses on objects, not relationship, and who wants to exploit and manipulate those objects in order to control nature and all things. In the East, the gentle power of the long-sighted femininity, who holistically perceives the world's interconnectedness of all objects, who cultivate and appreciate them in order to balance the relations amongst all beings. The East is feminine, the West is masculine. Unless we understand, we can't find answers in religion, answers in sociology, answers in politics, and answers in economics. About politics, certain references were made here as to how Indira Gandhi could become the Prime Minister of India in 1966, when the Swiss women could get voting rights only in 1972. In 1959, 2/3 of the Swiss men joined together to veto voting rights to Swiss women. And in India, in 1963, when the female literacy in Uttar Pradesh was less than 20%, Sucheta Kripalani could become the Chief Minister of the largest state of India. How could it happen? No Indian scholar, no Indian feminist, no Indian professor, no Indian government, no Indian institution did research into it. It is actually one Stefani Lewatama, a Korean scholar, a feminist. She made a study and came to the conclusion that in India, the concept that women are a weaker sex has no application. In India, power and women are related. They are intertwined. In fact, power flew out of women. When I went for a lecture tour in America in the year 2001, I took 3 pictures, Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati. I showed it to a mixed audience which consists of mostly American women. I showed them, this is our goddess of learning, this is the goddess of wealth, this is the goddess of power. They were surprised. Goddess? They have no idea that God could be woman. Their concept of God is man. A formless God is man. Nothing to do with women. You know, you can understand the status of women only when God is man, man only. And when we said this is our goddess, our God can be man, our God can be woman, our God can be man and woman put together, our God can be beyond all this. It depends on the competence and capability and realizing capacity of a person to perceive God in the manner he or she wants to perceive. And I said it is not only that our God can be woman, our woman can be God. When I explained the concept of Kanya Puja and Suhasini Puja, many American women wiped out their tears and said, do you respect women so much? Respect for women is in India, which is denied to the women of the West. This is the history of the West. This is the religious history of the West. This is the social history of the West. This is the political history of the West. And the absence of respect for women translated into their non-participation in politics. That is why Britain, which ran democracy for 900 years, gave voting rights to women only in 1926. America 1924. France 1945. Italy 1945. In India, no question arose whether women should be given voting right or not. Now there is a lot of discussion took place about female infanticide and the sex ratio. You will be surprised to know it is only in villages the sex ratio is better at 947. In towns it is 926. In metros it is 918. In places like Ludhiana, Chandigarh, below 900, the more educated, the more English educated, the more modern, less female child. And we blame the Indian tradition. It is the Indian villages which have kept up the girl population in this country. Illiterates have kept up. You know, in the year 1960, the female ratio in the most illiterate Bihar was 1061 to 1000 in 1960. Most people do not know. They think Indian tradition has to do with the decimation of Indian women population. It is absolutely wrong. And now about the rape. You know, when in 2012, this Delhi rape took place and the whole country came to a standstill for 1 month. The rupee value did not have any meaning. Price rises did not have any meaning. The economic decline did not have any meaning. We only talked about how could a woman be dealt with like this. The whole world felt the Indians are a country of rapists and killers. At that time, one Emma O'Toole, she wrote an article in the Guardian newspaper on the 10th of January 2013. And she said, what are you talking about this country? One rape has stalled this country. See what happens in Steubenville in America, where a woman, girl of 16 was taken from party to party for 3 days and butchered and thrown on the road. Police would not register a case. Newspapers would not publish. A blog writer wrote about it, a libel suit was filed against her. And finally, after the Delhi rape became a global issue, the police registered a case in January, arrested the culprit in March. Emma O'Toole said, you are talking about this country? I will talk about England. You know what is the rape to population ratio in England? 120 times India's. Rape to population ratio in America, 80 times India's. There it doesn't become a news at all. It is settled on the spot. You know, in this country it becomes a news because we respect women. The country is tall. But that is not the discourse in India. So all that I want to say is that women are respected in India is a very important part of our social capital. And that is reflected in the economic performance of India. I will in the next 10 minutes conclude my speech with this. You know, in 1992-93, when India was struggling with the idea of globalization, Dr. Jagdish Bhagwati, a very reputed economist in US, an Indian but with a completely American thinking as to how development should be fashioned in a country, he was brought to India. Dr. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister at that time. Dr. Manmohan Singh asked him that we are struggling, please tell us how to come out of this economic mess. He said the problem of India is the Indian family and importantly the Indian women. He said India is saving 19% of the GDP as family savings. It should be reduced to 9 to 10%. If the balance 9 to 10% becomes expenditure, then it will become sales, then it will become production, then it will become employment. Nobody can stop the growth of India if you cut down the family savings for which the Indian women are responsible. They are so stingy, they don't want to be buyers, they suppress their desires. There is so much of responsibility on them. They feel they have to take care of the children, the husband, the in-laws, the near and dear. And unless you stop them from being so obsessed with their responsibility and make them consumers, India is not going to develop. And the Indian government accepted their idea, and he also said they are not going to buy your useless goods. You have to bring goods from abroad, jewelry, textiles, and all kinds of cosmetics and beauty items. And if you can't produce, bring it, or you allow the multinational companies to produce here. And the Indian woman's desire must be so aroused as to overcome all her responsibilities to turn her into consumers. The government began doing it. They cut down the excise duty, cut down the tariffs, and made goods cheaper, and they built huge malls. And media was happy, advertisement songs were there. You all sang the songs but did not buy the goods. I am not saying it poetically. You know, it transformed into the savings figure of India. 19% of the GDP, family savings, in 1992 rose to 29% in 2009. And that made the Indian savings 37%, investment 40%, growth rate 10%. And the Goldman Sachs in its global Economic Report 187 came out with an astounding finding that India is the only emerging economy which developed without much foreign investment. Just 1.2% of the total investment constituted foreign investment in a period of 20 years. And Goldman Sachs said India's infrastructure requirements were $400 billion once, $1.3 trillion later. Now it is $1.7 trillion, for which India does not need even $1 from outside, because the family system of India is capable of generating the kind of savings which is needed to fund the infrastructure. Where is the Indian economic discourse? Except Shankaracharya, who was the economic advisor to the government of India, he wrote one article in the Business Standard newspaper. There is nothing in India There is an Indian women's mind working in Indian economics. We conducted a study of 72 management institute and economic schools in and around Coimbatore area of women economic teachers, financial specialists who are teaching, asking them about their investment preferences. They were saying, we invest in banks, we invest in property, we invest in gold. We don't invest in stocks. We said, you are teaching everybody that you should invest in stocks. No, that is only for teaching in the class. Can you see the difference between economic education in India and economics in practice? And this has translated into a huge economic benefit for India. This year, Indian women, Indian families are going to deposit 10 lakh crores in banks. The government is going to borrow 6 lakh crores for its sustenance. American government has to borrow money. American people do not deposit money in banks. They have no money to deposit. You know, American savings rate has crashed from 80% of the total savings being the family savings in 1960 to minus 20% in 2006. 11 crore American families have 120 crore debit and credit cards on which they owe a debt of $3 trillion equal to 180 lakh crores. Their housing is in debt. $10 trillion is the debt. Both put together constitutes more than 75% of the American GDP. American families are in debt. American banks are in debt. American government is in debt. America is borrowing 2/3 of the world's, 3/4 of the world's savings. And 3/4 of the world's savings is generated in Asia. Asia is a family-oriented society. A family-oriented society is a duty-bound society, relationship-oriented society. An individualist society is a contract-oriented society, a rights-driven society. There is rights-based economy and duty-based economy. We form part of the duty-based economy, the center of which is the woman. And it is she who has shaped these duties, relationship. They have maintained relationships. And the masculinity which dominates the Western world and transforms into consumption. The masculine consumption has made women benchmark men there. Because of the intense conflict of genders. Conflict of genders is not only in India. In India, most of the problem are between women, not between man and woman. The problem of tussle between man and woman starts with religious faith in the West. So, all this translates into social model, economic model, political model. So, Stefani Lavatama said, if in India, Indira Gandhi could become the Prime Minister, and when she won the war against Pakistan, she was revered as goddess Durga. And Jayalalitha, when in 1998, she was celebrating this is Stefani Lavatama saying, not me. When she was celebrating the silver jubilee of the ADMK, there were posters all over by the Dravidian party calling her and celebrating her as Mahishasura Mardini. Where is woman being a weaker sex in India, which you are reading in newspapers every day? Feminists are talking about it. Intellectuals are hawking this idea. The media is echoing it. Is there one challenge to this idea from women intellectualism? Women intellectualism, carbon copies Western intellectualism, as Mrs. Birla said here. We need an alternative thought. Then only you can build an alternative economic model. The world needs an economic model where you will take care of parents, elders, infirm, unemployed people by themselves. And you know, this economics, the state will take care of everybody. This was proposed in Mahabharata days by one Bahuka, who was the advisor to Jarasandha. And maybe this is something which Premaji should be talking, but because I have done some work on economics and Indian tradition, I am going to talk to you about, quote about what, sorry. This Bahuka was the advisor of Jarasandha, and Kamsa was the son-in-law of Jarasandha. Kamsa had a terrible time. He had all bad name because he was ordering the killing of children. And then he asked Bahuka that I am hated by everybody. Please tell me, how can I get good name? How can I make the people respect me? is that the people will not respect you because they respect only sages who do not want anything from anybody, and people will not, because you are such a wretched man, they will not respect you. Don't you give me any hope. How can I make the people respect me? He said something which the rulers of this country, the rulers of America, the rulers of Europe must study. He said, you have a very big weapon in your hand, your purse. Release the purse. Give the people what they want. Make the children feel the parents are old and useless. They should not take care of them. Make the women feel pleasure is more important than chastity. And everybody should be dependent on you. And when everybody is dependent on you, all the relationships collapse and the families are destroyed, then you will be the master. And they will take your lash as if it is a favor from you. This is Bahuka's economics. This became Alan Greenspan's economics. This is becoming the economics of many political parties, ensuring that the people do not stand on their legs, for which family is the primary instrument. Rights-oriented approach destroys the families. You have right against your parents, against your wife, against your husband, against your children, against your near and dear. You are free from them, dependent on the state. This is the new concept of freedom, new concept of economics. Femininity alone can prevent this kind of catastrophe from coming into this country. And this movement with which I am associated because of my close association with Dr. Padma Subramaniam gives me intense happiness and hope that if this multiplies, it force multiplies into a huge national movement which can happen in the next 10 to 15 years, I think India will be able to tell the West how they should behave. We can export womanhood to a place where women have become like men. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sri Gurumurthy. For his speech proves that it's not just femininity that rules the home, but rules the country as well. After hearing to Sri SG, I'm sure all of us will go back home very, very satisfied that we contribute in no small measure to the economic prosperity of India, and we can all well afford to put our invisible collars up. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a moment of pride for this convention that women from different walks of life passionately associated themselves with this cause. Right from the ideation of this initiative to the event which is here today, to the plenty of initiatives that you're going to see here tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, could I please request you to take your seats? It's going to take just another 5 minutes, and we'd be very, very happy to have you here. There are some small gifts that we've planned for all women who've attended this convention today. And these are gifts that you're going to like, relish, remember, and let me give you a small tip, wear. So it'll be very nice if you can stay back, and thank you so much for your cooperation. This is a very unique event in the sense that the people who introduced the speakers of today are women eminently worthy of illustrious introductions. Now it's time to honor them and to honor the vice chairpersons of the various organizing committees who are on the dais. May I kindly request Srimati Rajshri Birla to honor them. I'd like to begin with Srimati Vanita Mohan. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Srimati Vanita Mohan. Mrs. Vanita is a highly respected industrialist and is the vice chairman of Pricol Limited. She is also the managing trustee of Sirutuli, an NGO in Coimbatore focusing on greenery and water. Her message for the convention is global problems are family driven and has an Indian solution because of India's family safeguards that are built largely by Indian women. Ladies and gentlemen, Srimati Akila Srinivasan. Could I please request you to put your hands together for Mrs. Akila? She is the managing director, I repeat, the managing director of Shriram Life Insurance Company and a very highly respected corporate citizen. I'm told she's also a very talented singer. She's also the president of the Tamil Nadu chapter of the Art of Living Foundation. Her message for the convention is thanks to Indian families run by Indian women, India is more insured by Indians than the rest of the world by Americans. Could I please request Srimati Hema Gopal to rise? She is a vice president with Tata Consultancy Services and is a veteran in the IT industry with several accomplishments to her credit. A globalized corporate citizen and an Indianized woman, her message in the IT industry language is, Indian woman is the hardware, software and the antivirus that protects India from the West-centric modernity that's not relevant here today. Sushri Nivedita Bide. Nivedita ji. She is the Vice President of Vivekananda Kendra, Kanyakumari and is a Jeevan Vrati. A strong proponent of Swami Vivekananda's thoughts, Dr. Bide believes that Indian women are India's spirit, nothing less. Last but definitely not the least, Srimati Rajalakshmi. She is the secretary of the Swami Vivekananda 150 Women's Initiative. She's an entrepreneur in her own right and a moral activist. She is and will continue to be the fuel that powers and spirits the SV 150 Women's Initiative engine and believes that she will celebrate womanhood through this maiden venture and assures many, many more such initiatives across the nation. A debut well made is a career well built. It's not only true for cricket, but for events of this type, because both depend on the venue and the pitch. We've gotten to start in a very, very lucky venue, the Nardagana Sabha. Chennai and Nardagana Sabha are synonymous with culture and values. Ladies and gentlemen, could I please call Sri R. Krishnaswamy, Secretary of the Nardagana Sabha, who's been a pillar of strength. He's not here and we'd like to thank him in absentia. The photography for this entire event was done by a lady photographer, Srimati Pramila Sridhar. And she's done it free of cost. And thank you very much, madam. May I kindly request Dr. Padma Subramaniam to honor her. Ladies and gentlemen, Srimati Pramila Sridhar. Could I please call Sri Sudhakar of Swati Soft Solutions, who's volunteered to sponsor the videography and the webcasting of this event. Sri Sudhakar? I'm here. And could I please request Sri Gurumurthy to honor him.
I request Dr. Shanta to give a memento to Sri Priya, the MC of this evening, who is a chartered accountant, member of Regional Council.
Could I please call Srimati Gayatri Girish, who rendered the prayer and the Deepa Shloka today, to come onto the dais, please? Oh, come. In any case, we'd like to thank her in absentia as well. Ladies and gentlemen, events, meetings, conferences come and go. Promises are made in all the dioceses every time events such as these happen, and to be forgotten only to leave way for a new set of promises. But Swami Vivekananda 150 Women's Initiative believes in being different. We will tread a different path. A convention of this type, uniquely organized and converging ladies and gentlemen, we've managed to converge 1,000 women here today, and I think that calls for a huge round of applause, and I'd like to see more applause. The Women's Initiative for Powering the Next Indian Ethical Generation, which got conceptualized, will now be seated as a resolution to be read out by Srimati Rajshri Birla. After Srimati Birla reads out the resolution, I request all the women members present here to unanimously accept the resolution by raising your right hands and by chanting Om, with the divine hope that this germinates into a big tree as we move forward into the new millennium. May I please request Srimati Rajshri Birla to read out the resolution.
The women delegates, numbering over 1,000, assembled at Swami Vivekanand 150 Women's Convention at Narad Gyan Sabha in Chennai on January 23, 2014, who have been given pre-convention briefing in 35 groups, meetings organized since August 2013 on the basic theme of the convention, and who have agreed on the theme as explained to them and on the vision and mission statement circulated to them, and who are determined to preserve the Indian culture and way of life to avoid the adverse effects of unbridled individualist modernity on Indian women, and who have gathered at the convention with one mind and one goal, namely to equip and prepare themselves and the other Indian women to become and be the guide for the world at crossroads, and who have agreed to contribute their might to achieve the vision and mission of the convention. Hereby resolved to constitute Swami Vivekanand 150th Women's Foundation as a public trust incorporating the vision and to carry out the mission of the convention as set out in the brochure and other documents, including the vision and mission statement circulated ahead of the convention to the delegates present, and as explained to them in the course of the 35 pre-convention briefings, and authorized Dr. Padma Subramaniam, chairperson of the organizing committee of the convention, and Dr. V. Shanta, the chairperson of the reception committee, to take all steps as may be necessary, including such process of consulting as they deem fit to form and bring the trust into existence. Resolution read out to the delegates by the chief guest, Srimati Rajshri Birla, and unanimously resolved by the audience by raising the hands and saying Om.
Could I please request you to stand by for the national anthem?
Organizing committee members.
I request all the registered delegates to kindly accept the organizer's souvenir as a token of affection. All of you will definitely like this gift. Those seated behind row Q and those in the balcony can collect it at the rear. The remaining can kindly collect it from the front of the exit.
Organizing committee members will be honored.
And Dr. Padma Subramaniam will come down personally and honor the organizing committee members seated in the front row. You may just sit for a few minutes until then, and then we'll have the national anthem. Could I please request? Oh, okay. Okay, so fine, we'll finish the national anthem then. And this is a different event. You just don't rise for the national anthem, you sing the national anthem as well. भाग्य विदाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष माहे गाए तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता